So we have, make sure I'm out of UV mode here. There we go. We have our 2 squares at the top. We have our 2 rectangles along the side. I'll make sure I don't select something I don't want. And we have our frame around the edge. We're going to jump into our top viewport and do the same thing again. I'm just going to hold down the shift key and shift drag a copy. Copy, always a copy. And I'm going to rotate it 180 degrees. We'll jump back into our orthographic here and make sure it's positioned correctly. Alright, let's do the same thing again. We're going to shift drag a copy in our top viewport. Rotate it 90 degrees. Move it off to the other side. Just going to move this one over so it's in line a little bit better. And one more for the opposite side. So shift drag and rotate 180 degrees. And again, I'm just going to move it over slightly. Maybe not quite that much. Then we'll move it back to make sure it is actually intersecting our geometry. Alright. Okay, so now we can attach all of these pieces together now that we've just made a bit more interest in this column. Let's choose the original column here, and we're in edit poly mode. We're just going to attach base piece. And these top pieces together. Now again, I can go into list mode here to make my attach, but like I've been saying to you guys, this is another one of those little quirks of Max. I don't suggest you use that because it can mess up your material ID assignments. I prefer to do it by hand like this. It can take a little bit longer, but you'll 9 times out of 10 get a good attach as opposed to using multi-attach in Max. So the time you save using multi-attach, you're going to lose because you're going to have to undo it all and do it by hand anyway, so to get it to work properly. And you see, if I just keep moving my mouse around until that little plus sign stops being shown, then I know I've actually selected everything. I could keep rotating my model to make sure, but I don't need to. Max will notice, pick up anything in the background. It should be attached if you want it to be. And like I said, if you're not sure, then if you think you've got everything, you can just move your model piece, and if anything is left behind like that, you know you've missed something. So we will just rotate around and make sure we grab these 3 pieces up here in the corner. And now I think we've got everything, so we'll move it. Nothing gets left behind, so we know we're good. We're going to call this one, we'll call this one main column. Okay. I'm just going to copy that name, and I'm going to export this piece of geometry. So export selected. We'll jump into our exports folder. Create a new folder for it so that we keep everything nice and organized, and we're going to save it out as our FBX file called main column. Again, smoothing groups, triangulate, preserve edge orientation. Also, just before I do that, I do want to do a reset on the XForm. I always like to do that to make sure that it imports into the Unreal Engine properly. So we're just going to export it one more time at that reset XForm place. Let's jump into Unreal and import that model we just exported. Should all be good. It's going to create the materials automatically, which we don't want. Generate tangent bases. Let's see what that's done. Okay, it looks like we have a problem with our normal maps again. Our normals, I should say, again. You can see it here. These 2 column sides are correct. These 2 column sides look like they're flipped. So let's jump back into Max again quickly. I'm going to select the column. I'm going to throw down a normal modifier. I don't want to flip them, I do want to unify my normals. I'm going to collapse that stack. We have our whole object selected. I'm going to throw down another normal modifier. I'm going to unify my normals again on the complete model again. Collapse my stack. I don't know if it's in Blender or any other 3D software, but there is a really useful tool in Max if you're looking at trying to find out what's going on with your normals. Got to try and find it. Here we are, edit normals. This is really useful. It shows you your normals, the direction that they're facing, and whether they're facing in the correct way or not, based on these little blue lines that are sticking out from the model. Like I said, I don't know if you have an option like that in Blender or Maya, but it's very useful in Max, this edit normals. If you do want to check your normal maps, your normals, not normal maps, your normals, to make sure they're pointing in the correct direction. So if you do use a third-party 3D program, look for something that has that type of functionality to check your normals. Okay, let's export the model again. Main column. Yes, we want to override it. Okay. Let's re-import the model again into Max. You see we got no error now from Max in our error log. Let's check the model. We got no error, but Max has actually turned our model inside out. We don't want that. But again, it's I'm just checking all of the pieces of the model here. They should all be turned inside out. And they are. Again, that's an easy fix. All we do is jump back into Max Throw down our normal modifier, which is flipping our UVs. We'll make sure we do a unify again. Collapse our stack one more time. Export our model one more time. Yes, we'll overwrite. Yeah, Sniper Echo said this. You're saying you should have something. I'm pretty sure Blender would probably have something similar. Most 3D software will have a way for you to check the direction of your normals, because it's important in 3D modeling to know how your normals are sitting on your model. Let's just re-import this again. And 9 times out of 10, if you're having problems with lighting in your model, that's the reason. It's because your normals are incorrect. And now we have our normal maps looking correct. So we have nice soft edges here on our decorative framing on the center of the column. And our normal maps are looking right. So that's just allowed us to give a bit more interest to the column, to this main column piece than the original had. And we're picking up on that because we're reusing that piece of the geometry we used for the square railings here. It helps to tie all of our model pieces together. Again, that consistency to make sure everything looks like it belongs together. What we do have to do though is we have to swap out the textures that Unreal created for that piece, because we've already made them. We don't want to have 2 textures the same, because we're just wasting processing and memory by doing that. So we're going to jump into our materials. I'm going to open up that column we just imported. It shows all of our materials. And we're going to start replacing them with the ones we've already created. So we're going to drag that one over there. We're going to drag that one up there. And this one here. We're just going to give the engine a minute to compile those shaders. There we go. Save our file. And now we're reusing the same materials we've used for the other assets. Again, that's saving on our memory usage and all that type of stuff. So let's drag this column into the level here so we can get a bit better of a look at it. And I just want to make sure all of my my pieces of geometry here, the colors all match. So I'm just going to pull that back a bit here next to the railing. And again, we want to make sure that, like I said, the assets look like they belong together. So the colors match, the asset pieces look like they match. They're all part of one set. Well, and so we can keep that consistent look. Now, I could have gone in and added some weathering like we've done here with the with that central banister piece to make it look more old. We could do that by taking that into Substance Painter and just wearing up the edges a bit. I'm not going to do it here though, because we're reusing for memory. So we're reusing the same texture on multiple assets to try and reduce the memory usage in the game's engine as much as we can. If we wanted to start painting in this sort of weathering and detailing unique to that piece of geometry, we'd have to reload that texture multiple times, or we'd have to, what we'd probably have to do is render out a new version of that texture from Substance Painter. So we're going to be increasing our memory count, because as it is at the moment, that one texture we're using on 1, 2, 3, about 4 or 5 different pieces of geometry in that level. And if we wanted to add that individual wearing like that, like we see here, we're going to have to save out 5 different versions of the same texture, slightly different, that we've painted up in Substance Painter. Now, there's not a problem with doing that, but you just have to be aware that the more textures you start introducing into the game engine, the more memory you're going to start using, and the slower the game is going to start running. So whenever you can, if you can, you're much better off reusing the same texture multiple times, just to save on that memory that the graphics card is going to have to deal with. So again, just as an example, that one texture we're using there, we're also using for this piece of geometry here. We're using for this piece of geometry here. We're using for this piece of geometry here. And we're also using for this piece of geometry here. So out of one texture, well, in this case it's actually two different textures, we're getting 5 different pieces of geometry. So one texture, 5 different assets. Again, that's just saving our texture usage as much as we can. So just something to bear in mind. By all means, you can texture up all your assets to be really unique, but you're going to have to use unique textures, and that's going to use more memory. So wherever possible and wherever you can, try and reuse the same texture as much as you can on different types of geometry, like we have here. Okay, just one of those things to keep in mind, and it's much more important if you're creating a game that you're going to be running on a mobile device like an Android or an iPhone. You really don't have a lot of memory to play with like you do on a graphics card that's on a desktop PC. It's really going to be an issue, so you're really going to have to try and reuse as much as you possibly can. It's just a good habit to get into anyway with games development, because even though you have the memory and even though you can afford to use more memory, where you can save memory is always going to be beneficial for the running of your game. It's just going to make the game faster, because there's less that the graphics card has to read in and load in at one time. So yeah, try and reuse textures as much as you can. Don't get carried away though. Don't do it to the extent that it starts to make your game look like crap. Like, don't reuse the same texture too much if it's going to make the game look shitty. You know what I mean? You still want your game to look great, and you can still reuse your textures, just don't go overboard, that's all. And these assets here are a good example of that, because even though we're reusing the same texture, it's really not going to be noticeable to the average person that we are. Like this texture here that we're using for the front of these small rectangular pieces is this texture we're using here in this large column. People are not going to put 2 and 2 together. And again, because these are up on the ceiling as well. The same with these decorative pieces here that go around the outside of the window curtains. No one's going to notice that we're reusing a texture we've used on our column here for our windows, because we're using different parts of the texture in a different way. And the same thing goes for the top door jamb. So smart reuse of the same texture is always preferred, but don't go overboard and don't make your game look shitty by doing it. There's no point in saving memory on texture memory if you make your game look like crap, because you want it to look as good as you can. So just a couple of things to keep in mind for optimization and making sure your game runs as fast as it possibly can and uses the least amount of memory it possibly should use. But you are going to have to make those compromises where you won't be able to paint in that weathering and detailing like we have here on this larger piece. Less important for these pieces because they're smaller, they're higher up in the level, so people are never really going to get close enough to them to see them in detail, with the exception of maybe this column, which you could do. If you wanted to, you could make a separate texture for that and weather it a bit like we have here on the banister. And as Malik is saying, and it also only has to be downloaded once, and that's exactly right. The fewer textures you the fewer textures you use in your game level, the less the computer graphics card has to load those textures up. You'll notice this too a lot of the times with a lot of games, when the when the level first loads in, you'll see that the textures are really blurred and low quality, and then they'll gradually load in. You see them popping in, it's high detail. And that's what it's doing, it's loading those textures in, and that takes time, which in some game levels you can see with texture pop in. Some engines handle it better than others. The Unreal Engine does it pretty well. But if you use too many textures, you're still going to get that problem. So the fewer textures you use in your level, the less chance you're going to have of that texture pop-in problem happening. Because it's just going to load the one texture in that we're using for the column, and then it's going to repopulate that texture in an instant on all the other pieces of the geometry. You're not going to be waiting on the game engine to load all those different textures in for all the different pieces. Just checking our colours, and our colours are fine. All of our pieces look like they blend and match and work together. Again, consistency, we have to make sure that they all look like they belong together. Let's get rid of some of these that we don't need now, because we're reusing the same materials, so we can delete these ones. And we're also reusing the same texture maps, so we can delete these ones. And let's delete this material that we don't need it at all. And I want to rename that column piece underscore MSH again, so I have everything nice and organized when I start putting this building together in Unreal. And let's save everything so that we don't lose what we've done. Alright, let's jump back into Max now. We're finished with this column, so let's exit isolation mode. And let's move that column piece back. Remember, everything in the background here is stuff we've done, so we don't have to worry about it. It's only the stuff that's left in the foreground that we still have to work on. A lot of these pieces will get into the engine quite quickly because they're just floor pieces. A few of them I do want to change the textures on, so we'll probably end up doing that in Mari. Particularly this piece here, I really don't like that texture. Let's see what else we've got here. So we're nearly there, we're getting there. We've only got a few pieces left to bring into, into Unreal. This chandelier is going to be a bit of work. We'll tackle that next week. Aside from that, we're getting there. Malik is saying, where is the real Virtuality 4 engine compared to Unreal Engine? Where is the real Virtuality 4 engine? I'm not sure what you mean, Malik. What do you mean the real Virtuality 4 engine? Oh, I'm not familiar with that engine. Can you explain what it is a little bit more? Is it another engine that people are using for virtual reality? I know you can use virtual reality with the Unreal Engine. If you want to make a VR game, you can use the Unreal Engine for that. They promote that quite a bit at Epic. Personally, I've played with virtual reality, but I don't like playing in virtual reality, to be honest. I prefer to use a monitor. I like the it can be very immersive to have those VR goggles on. I find that after about a half an hour my face starts to get really hot, and I also find that it can make you feel a bit queasy sometimes as well. It's cool to be immersed in that environment, don't get me wrong, but just the fact that it's uncomfortable to wear that thing strapped to your face for too long. So I tend not to do too much with VR. If I'm playing a game, I like to play it on the monitor or on the big screen TV. Yeah. But VR's cool. It's the latest buzz thing that's going on in gaming. I think it needs a bit more work though before it becomes really mainstream. I wouldn't, if I was making a game. Malik is saying, how's the real Virtuality 4 engine compared to Unreal Engine? Okay. 3:49 in the morning, Malik. That's pretty early. How is the real Virtuality 4 engine? Again, I'm not familiar with this real Virtuality 4 engine you're talking about. I'm assuming that's a separate engine like the Unreal Engine that you mean. And I'm not familiar with it. I've not heard of it. But again, I don't do a lot with virtual reality in my working life either. I don't use it in my personal life to play games, and in studio work I don't use virtual reality either. It's very cool, and like I said, it's the current buzz thing to be playing with. But I just find it uncomfortable to have that thing strapped to my face for extended periods of time, and it does tend to give you a bit of eye strain as well, which is I'm still not convinced that having screens this far from your eyes is healthy for your eyes. No one has convinced me that staring at screens that are that close to your face and to your eyeballs is not going to damage your eyes in some way. So I'd give virtual reality a few more years before I think it becomes mainstream. And if I was a developer making a game, I would not target VR. I don't think that the install base is big enough to get a proper return on the time it's going to take to make that game for VR. So I don't think you're going to get your return back. I wouldn't target VR. I'd target mobile, if you want to do mobile, or desktop, or games console, before I target VR. I've noticed that a lot of guys get very caught up in VR, and it's very cool. It's cool technology, but like I said, it's just not there yet. Screens aren't high enough res. I still have questions about how it's affecting your eyesight being so close to your eyeballs, and the comfort having those things strapped to your head is not great. So, but as far as that real Virtuality 4 engine goes, I'm not familiar with it, so I can't say. I'm sorry, Knight. Is it Hamilton, I think, 55? Thank you for following my Twitch channel. I do appreciate that, thank you. I do appreciate it when you guys follow me on Twitch. I appreciate it when you guys show up to watch me on Twitch. So yeah, I don't want to... I'd avoid VR for the moment anyway. I wouldn't develop for VR either. Like I said, I don't think there are enough people with VR headsets that you get enough money back basically selling your game to that niche market. Yeah. That's my personal opinion. I have no figures to back that up, apart from knowing roughly how many VR headsets have been sold. Yeah. I'm just going through my assets here to see what we can bring in next. These we should be able to bring in pretty much as they are. These are the ceiling pieces. These are the ceiling plasterwork, I guess you'd call it, that goes within in the different rooms. We could bring those in as they are. I do, though, I probably might look at doing some parallax mapping with these. So these are the type of thing that parallax mapping would work really well for. Again, just using a normal map on this, you're not really going to get... You're going to get some height information, but parallax mapping would work better for this type of thing. It's a very rigid geometric pattern, and parallax could probably... I actually used parallax mapping in the UDK version you saw of the fly-through. Malik saying, alright, it's the engine for the game Arma 3. Oh, okay. No problems. Thank you, Malik, for hanging out and for watching. The stream is about to finish in about 5 minutes anyway, so you're not going to miss much. Again, thank you for hanging out and for watching. Remember, guys, I'll be back after today on Tuesday next week. So there's no stream tomorrow and no stream on Monday next week because I'm going away to the mountains, a cabin in the woods for a week with no technology, so I can just chill out over Easter. So no stream tomorrow, no stream on Monday next week, but I'll be back to my normal schedule on Tuesday next week. So Tuesday, Wednesday next week, and then back to normal. Thank you, Malik, for hanging out. Have a good night's sleep, and have a great Easter too. Alright, let's have a look here. So yeah, I probably will end up doing some parallax mapping, I think, for these pieces of plaster work for the ceiling. Probably what I'll end up doing is I'll add a frame around the outer edge here to give that a bit more depth, and then I'll use parallax mapping for the interior part of that plaster. I think we'll look at that though when I come back next week. I want to change the texture on this rug. I really don't like it. This is a small rug that's used on the stairs upstairs in that building, and I don't like the texture, so we're going to swap that out at some stage as well. I want to actually redo the tiling that's around the outside of the edges of these floor pieces. The grout on this texturing is terrible, guys. So, you know, like I said, I did this 6 years ago. Don't judge me. But the texturing is terrible. And what I mean by terrible, okay, let's analyze this, shall we? The wood texture in the middle is okay as the texture goes, but you see this light pattern here through the center that it's looked like it's been worn. Now, I have no problem with having a floor that looks like it's been worn by people walking on it, but that just doesn't look natural. You're not ever going to have a wearing pattern that's in a straight line like that to begin with. So that's got to be changed. This wooden texture has got to be changed. The wood, like I said, the pattern itself is fine. That worn pattern that's been repeated is terrible. That has to be changed up. So we're going to have to do something with the wooden floor here, and let's analyze these tiles, shall we? And how bad this texturing job is. And I can analyze it because it's my texturing job, and you know, I'll wear it. Look at the grout here. This is a floor piece, okay? Then this runs down the whole like section of that top floor, where the camera goes through the door on the top section and looks down. So it runs the whole length of the front of the building. So it's a long piece of floor basically. So it's like a whole room or two full. Look at the size of the grout. Now that's just, yeah, that grout would be like almost the size of somebody's hand. Or maybe not, but half the size of someone's hand. You know, you don't have grout that's that big. It's just really not natural, not normal, and not right. Again, during the fly-through, in my defense, you really don't see these parts of the model very much. The camera moves very quickly through these areas in that building. So it's not immediately obvious when you're watching that video fly-through. But when you look at the actual texture itself, it's really bad. The grouting is way too big. The wear pattern on the wood is wrong. It should never be, you're never going to get wearing in a straight line like that. And even the actual tiling of the tiles themselves here, you see it's not done really well. It's like a thin edge of a tile here, which it just wouldn't happen. You don't get tiny, when a tiler comes in, they don't put a sliver of tile there like that. So we're going to have to redo these. The textures on these are going to have to be redone. That's going to go for all these pieces here. The only one that may be okay is this parquetry that's on the upper floor. But even with this parquetry, I want to take this texture into Mari, and I want to add a little bit more wearing and a little bit more variation in the color. Because again, this looks way too clean. Now, I'm not saying we're going to make a completely filthy floor, but you're going to have some variation in the color of any floor like this, particularly one that's in a building that's from the 1930s. So even if the floor had been re-parquetried, last year, you're still going to get a bit of variation in the color. It's never going to be a flat, all the same color like that. That's just not natural. It's never going to happen. Even on a newly laid floor, there's always going to be a bit of variation in the color, because each one of these parquetry pieces of wood is never going to be identical. So in real life, so you're never going to get a texture that looks like that in real life, a floor that looks like that. So we'll take this into Mari, and like I said, the texture itself, I don't mind. It's okay. I like the parquetry, I like the color. But I want to take it into Mari and add a bit of variation here and there in it. Darken up the corners a little, add a little bit of wearing here and there. We'll do all of that in Mari. Again, another piece of that floor that needs to be fixed. Again, these are just small parquetry pieces of floor that we're going to do the same thing with. We're just going to add a bit of variation here and there. And this terrible thing, we're going to improve this as well. Now, I don't mind the tile here. This is a tile, as in that fly through at the very end when we come out through the back part of the building before we exit the back door. This is the tile that's underneath of that overhang of the square balcony. This sits underneath of it. Again, I don't mind that texture that we're using that I'm using in the center here. I hate these tiles around the outside. They look, again, the scaling is all wrong. These tiles at the back are smaller than the ones at the side. That's just not natural, not normal, and not right. The grouting is way too wide, way too big. And I'm a bit iffy on the way that this texture here has been stretched a bit. It looks okay, but by rights this should be a circle, not an oval. We may look at changing that up as well, I think. But we'll tackle all of these problems next week when I come back. So again, I do want to thank you guys very much for hanging out today and for watching the stream. I do want to remind you guys that I won't be streaming tomorrow. I'm going away to the mountains to recoup and rest and have no technology around me, no phones, no TV, nothing like that. It's one of those retreats where you don't have any tech around, just to recharge, because I've been working 7 days a week for the past month or so, so I'm a bit tired. I'll be back on Tuesday next week, so I'm not streaming tomorrow. I'm not streaming on Monday next week, because I normally stream Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. I'm streaming again Tuesday next week, so it'll be Tuesday, Wednesday. And then we'll be back to my normal schedule of Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday each week. So I do again want to thank you guys very much for hanging out and for watching. I hope you guys have a wonderful Easter. You don't eat too much chocolate and all that type of thing. Remember, everything in moderation, guys. So I hope you guys have a great break, a great Easter. I will be back again on Tuesday next week. I'm only missing 2 streams, tomorrow's and Monday's. We'll be back on Tuesday next week, and then we will pick up where we left off here and get the rest of these assets moved over to Unreal, so that we can start putting this building together in the Unreal Engine. So again, guys, thank you very much for hanging out and for watching. Thank you, Malik and Hamilton, again for following my Twitch channel. I do appreciate it, guys, when you follow me on Twitch. Do remember, guys, if you're not sure when I'm streaming, but although I've just told you it's going to be Tuesday next week now, do keep an eye on my Twitter page at PhilDoes3D, because I always post 15 minutes before I go live to my Twitter account. So you guys have a great Easter, a great break. I will see you guys on Tuesday next week, all fresh and revitalized from my tech-free Easter break. So again, guys, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you on Tuesday next week. See you guys.